Today's patient is an Xbox Series X. Problem is there's no video output. At least that's kind of how it started, and then it got worse and worse. Disk drive was making a little bit of noise, and we were able to put it into safe mode and get a few beeps out of it. So I'm thinking the APU and the SSD are most likely not the problem. This turned into a task failed successfully kind of thing. Yeah, definitely no video. Biggest problem from the outside, it doesn't look too bad. It looks like there might be some pins on the left side that were lifted up. It looks like that metal in the bottom has been bent in and out, so hopefully that's all that it takes. First, there's a couple screws underneath the stickers. Got to peel those off, get rid of the warranty. Don't need that no more. And gently a little spudger along the outside corners. Not a bad idea to take the fan out. There's a couple of different bolts that attach that in there, as well as one little connector. There's a sneaky little tab that helps take that circular base off. You got to get that depressed in to be able to pop it off. Then you got about 4 more green screws and 1 more that's into the disk drive. Got to be extra careful with these ribbon cables. One's a little push down, pop out, and the other one's a lift and pull. Careful, very fragile. Once the fragile parts are out of the way, we can start pulling things out of there. Man, the fan was dirty. It was dropping dust bunnies all over my table. You also got to be careful with this plastic part over the disk drive. A couple screws and tabs to pop that off as well. Then once the disk drive connectors are exposed, we can give them a gentle tug, pop them out, and then everything should just start sliding on out of there. But man, look at all that crap in there. Just gross. Got to peel off some of this gunk first before I even bother working on it. Also be gentle with the power supply connectors, but these ones are pretty sturdy. Not as bad as the PS5, but man, there are a bunch of screws to get all this stuff taken out of here. Try to be prepared when you get the power supply pulled out so that you're not pulling the wires in a funny way. And for my hair, there's 2 different types of these ribbon connectors. One has a center tab like mine, and the other one has 2 end caps that you have to push in. So make sure you don't pull on the wrong side like I did. See how easy it is in the center when you give it a little push down, it just wiggles out. More dust bunnies everywhere, but on the inside, this thing's looking pretty good. Pretty minor bent pins on the left, but hopefully that's all it needs, because I can't see anything too different off of the new and the old one. First, let's get this X clamp off so we don't heat anything else that we don't need to. APU needs a little better thermal paste. That doesn't look like it's too covered. Not loving the color of this diode pack here. Really hoping that I don't have to replace that. First, let's check the usual suspects for some shorts and make sure the HDMI system's working well. And then we're going to need a little bit of flux and a whole bunch of heat to try to pop this sucker off. I really was having trouble getting this thing to heat up enough to pop off, so I ended up having to trim it off. And that's where this story turns sour. I took half an hour and flush cutters and worked my way through that sucker. But right at the end, I lifted every single trace and pad on the board. Of course, as a matter of principle, I had to take 6 hours and rebuild every single trace. An old guitar player trick to ground the pot back to itself. Believe me, this is not my best work. Some things aren't meant to be pretty, but if it works, it works. So let's take a little bit of time and make sure that each of those jumper wires makes a pretty solid connection. Then even more time checking continuity on the multimeter to see if I bridged any gaps with solder. Using the enameled wire really helped out so that I didn't have to worry too much about the wires crossing at all. but I wanted these to really set in there good so this thing had a fighting chance to work. Even had to run jumper wires all the way back to the backside at the ESD diode pack. But let's give it a little scrubber rub and see if she cleans up good. I just hope this was my only problem. Since we made it this far, we may as well clean up the APU and get some more thermal paste on there. And the piece de resistance, some UV solder mask. I am so belligerently confident in this that I just am going to lock my work away and solder mask. Because I have no reason to believe something this sketchy would never not work. Paint it on and blast it with a little UV light, and all of a sudden it's nice and firm, keeping those jumper wires intact and stationary. I don't even know if this is going to help hold anything in place any better, but I was so worried just flipping it over and reinstalling it that one of these jumpers would slightly fall out of place and cross paths and then end up ruining my whole day. I had already had one day ruined by ripping every trace off the board, so can't have it ruined twice. Screwed up once, screw it up good. But we'll call it practice, and now I'm getting practice at a new skill. Probably not necessary and probably not the right way to do it, but I do like getting the thermal putty back right on top of the components that it needs to be on top of and making sure it's going to have a nice firm seat when we sink the screws back in. Besides, who doesn't like playing with Play-Doh? A little bit of that good for the APU to keep it nice and cool. Spread it all over real good like. Picasso. And then let's get everything reinstalled and on the double. But boy, does this thing need a brushing to get all these frickin' dust bunnies out of here. I like to get a couple turns on each side of the cross brace just to make sure there's even pressure on the APU. More dirt, more disgusting, more gross, and then get those power supply connections seated back in and put those screws back where they belong. There's a lot of better videos out there to show you which screw goes exactly where and how many turns to make it, but that's not what I'm doing here. Don't forget to add the Wi-Fi card in and more scrub-a-dub. Try to take a little extra care for the fan because of how dirty everything was. Make sure it gets a good little bit of R&R at the spa. I need to get a good bottle of compressed air or maybe a pressure washer for next time. Chuck everything back into place just close enough that we can test it. If you have to force anything, something isn't sitting right, so don't just push. Make sure you double check and pull a few things out and see what didn't get set down right. Let's give it a test and see what happens. Do we still have power? Thank God. Good sign, it's trying to switch video. Show me the money. Let's go. Rock on. Rock on again. And again. Let's go.